I promised Dr. Anderson that I'd leave most of the humor to him, so without further ado, here's Dr. Anderson.
Thank you, Saul. Ladies and gentlemen, I think one of the greatest blessings that we enjoy is the fact that we can't see into the future. I don't know whether I would be standing here today as the president of Augsburg College if some 30 years ago I had known that a good friend of mine here at college by the name of John Stensvog would have married another good friend of mine, a fellow member of the Augsburg choir, Hannah Mayhus, and that these two would have produced Saul Stensvog, and that he would be the president of the student body. I say it is a blessing that you can't see everything that lies in the future. I want to welcome all of you back. I have spoken to various segments of the community before this occasion, and I happen to know that there are more at the college than are presently here this morning. I just got word that we have registered 1,630 people, and that is fairly close to target, somewhat down from last year, accounted for perhaps by the fact that one of the nursing schools no longer participates here at Augsburg College, which reduces the number of enrollees. But welcome to all of you to another school year. And I want to take this occasion to welcome particularly the students from other countries who are new to our Augsburg family. I would like to introduce these people. I'm going to make tremendous mistakes in the pronunciation of their names, but I hope that they will be able sufficiently to recognize what I say so that they can stand if they are here. And I want to read these names, and I think the interesting observation that should be made is the fact that they seem to have come, these new students, from different countries. In other words, there are no two people from the same country. Sveinring Flatten is the Crown Prince Harold Scholar from Norway. Now, if I read your name, stand up and stay standing until I tell you to sit down. Okay. Xu Pingyam from Hong Kong. Jonathan Ekuri from Nigeria. Looking for the Nigerian. Oh, that's all right. You can sit down. I know that Aster Bato from Ethiopia is here. I met her before. There she is, over here. Eric Yokino from Japan. And finally, Sumit Karokesnat from Thailand. Now, at least the reading of this list will inform you of the fact that there are people on this campus from other countries, and we welcome them and hope that we can get better acquainted as the year wears on. 50 years ago, someone described a college president or his work in these terms: all the president does is preside over a tangle that is full of queer animals, old, young, and middle-aged, with the sole ability to stand on a height above it and squirt perfume on the ensemble. That was 50 years ago. Today, perhaps some college presidents may feel that the essence of this job tends to make him kin to the inebriate who had too much to drink in the saloon and fell asleep, and then one of his pals, playing a practical joke, put some Limburger under his nose. When he woke up, he sniffed and shook his head and walked to the other side of the saloon, and then sniffed again and shook his head and said, "Isn't it awful?" He stumbled out the door and down the street. The first person he met, he said, "Isn't it awful?" He went a little farther, and the next person he said, "Isn't it awful?" Finally, he leaned against a lamppost, and he said to a third person, "Isn't it awful?" And the person said, "What's so awful?" And he said, "The whole world stinks." Now, this is sometimes the way one can feel. He can take a jaundiced view of so many things that he thinks everything is wrong. I'm happy to say that I fall someplace, I hope, between the perfume squirter and the Limburger sniffer. And perhaps today to be a bookseller, which is someplace in between, not a bookkeeper. You referred to the fact that I had been in the ministry. They say ministers are good bookkeepers. You lend them a book and you never see it again. But the book that I'd like to sell today is the book entitled From Fjord to Freeway by Dr. Carl Chrislock of our history department, the centennial history of this institution. I say I'd like to sell it because I think it ought to be read and reread. It ought to be read by all of us to give us a fresh sense of history, and it ought to be read also in order to further understand the character and the background and the problems of this institution. So I commend it to you. And if you are a new student or a new faculty member, you will be particularly interested in it. I think you can get it at a reduced rate in the bookstore. But it is from this particular book that I have chosen my text. Now, I may be like the minister who said, I always have a text. Firstly, I have a text. Secondly, I depart therefrom. Thirdly, I never return thereto. But the text for what I have to say this morning is in the last chapter of this book. And it is quoted on this little folder that you received when you came in. In the closing part of this last chapter in From Fjord to Freeway by Dr. Chrislock, the author sums up Augsburg's relationship to what he calls two academic revolutions. The first, he says, is a revolution which began in the late 1900s, or 1800s, the 19th century. It affected all colleges and universities. It was an influence which came from Europe through the graduate schools to put an emphasis upon academic quality. Academic quality oftentimes measured in terms of the number of people who had the highest degree possible, the PhD, teaching at an institution. With this emphasis came a strong push on the part of all these colleges and universities to get what we call accreditation. And this was a big hassle in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. Dr. L.W. Bull, who was the president of St. Olaf College when I was there, was very much put out with the North Central Association because they were hesitant to accredit St. Olaf since two of the department heads did not even have a bachelor's degree. But they were the eminent author Ole Rolvog and the great musician F. Milius Christiansen. But you see, the emphasis was on accreditation. And with that came also a stress on the ability of an institution to produce students who would go to graduate school or professional schools. And so in this kind of a milieu, each institution tried to find its place in the educational sun. And Dr. Chrislock in this book describes the struggle that Augsburg College had to meet the standards of this first revolution. And this was achieved by 1954. 30 years late, perhaps, but nonetheless, the college had arrived in these terms. So that by the end of the 50s, the author says the college's claim to academic excellence was credible. This is a reminder, however, of the fact that Augsburg as a college, in these terms, is essentially a young institution. By first revolution standards, I suppose you can say we are less than 20 years old. In the meantime, a second revolution was developing. The 60s saw this gathering upheaval, which had a number of elements in it, and I think you're acquainted with them because they have affected you in grade school and high school and college. There came for the academic community a breakdown in isolation. The ivory tower was no longer the model. there came a strong recognition of something that had been stoutly resisted heretofore, namely the third responsibility for a college or a university. The first responsibility, of course, to teach. The second, to inquire, research. But then came the third responsibility, namely service to the community. Now, it was interesting that this emphasis, which had been around Augsburg for a long time, finally became an element in this second revolution. With this came the acceptance of non-cognitive ways of learning. The oft-repeated statement, you don't get it all from books. Or, to finish our grade school doggerel, from teachers' cross-eyed looks. There came a new relationship between teacher and student, and all kinds of co-learner situations were created. Experimental programs of all stripes emerged as people sought to be relevant, so to speak, in this business of education. And underneath was a restlessness with structured schooling. All this has produced a tremendous amount of ferment in education, to the proportions of a revolution. And on balance, I think all of it has been terribly exciting and stimulating and freeing. And woe be to the Rip Van Winkle who thinks that he can sleep through a revolution. Of course, there has been a whole range of responses, all the way from the impatient militant. One of them from Minneapolis, who writes in a recent issue of College and University Business, saying the only thing to do is to shut down the whole educational establishment for 2 years, just can it for 2 years, and then start it up again and make something out of it. The responses range from that kind of extreme militarism to a worried gradualism that continually warns us, now don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever our reaction may be, the revolution is transpiring, and the question that bugs Crislock and bugs me, and I hope will bug you, is this: will Augsburg College affect the revolution, or will it only be affected? Will it be creator or reactor? Will it be at the center or only at the edge? Will there be leadership, or is it just a matter of catch-up? It's this question that Crislock is addressing in this text. On the other hand, it is by no means certain that Augsburg would become a creative center of the second academic revolution. Whether the college community possessed sufficient wisdom to translate noble aspirations into effective action remained to be determined. So too did Augsburg's capacity to withstand whatever law and order backlash might be gaining strength within American society. The financial problem also was critical. Many potential donors, whether taxpayers, churchgoers, or businessmen, tended to prefer schools that supported continuity rather than change. Finally, the process of communicating and interpreting Augsburg's educational effort to the outside world required a high degree of skill. There it is. And if you walk out with that little piece, you will have it all in that paragraph. For 25 years, I would say, the whole effort at this institution has been focused on becoming a respectable institution in the academic world. This has been achieved. My first address at a President's Convocation 8 years ago was taken from the words of St. Paul when he said, "I am a citizen of no mean city," trying to revive or get some pride into what we have here at Augsburg College. Now, I think, with that kind of achievement, we face the question, can we be a unique college, a creative center of the second academic revolution? Now, the first point in this paragraph indicates that the answer to this question is by no means certain. Uncertainty is a mark of our existence. Certainly as a college, and certainly as Augsburg College. But that's not bad. The game that has interest, the game that has excitement, the game that produces enthusiasm, the game that has tension is the uncertain game. Nobody really likes a laugher. One where the score is so lopsided, you know how it's going to come out. And when you start messing around with a revolution, you're always engaging in a risky business. It's the unknown outcome that makes for adventure. The Augsburg adventure has no more assurance of making it than Thor Heyerdahl had of making it with Ra across the North Atlantic, that papyrus boat that he built. But what an adventure! We will never become a creative center in the Second Revolution without experiencing the perils of uncertainty. This whole business is not a sure thing. Simply because, as Christlock points out, we have no assurance that we have the wisdom. And I'm very intrigued by the fact that he used the word wisdom, not money. We have no assurance that we have the wisdom to translate noble aspirations into effective action. But this is the challenge, to get from our rhetoric to reality. Now there have been, I am happy to say, at this institution, as I have experienced it over the past 8 years, many noble aspirations. And I believe that there has been some significant translation of those aspirations into reality. Take, for example, the curriculum. Some say that changing the curriculum is like moving a cemetery. Well, I think it is indicative of the spirit of this institution that there was a change in curriculum in 1965. In other words, we haven't been sitting with the same kind of calendar and curriculum for years and years and years. There was a change in 1965. And now the faculty has voted that there will be a change again in 1972. That next year at this time we will begin a 414 calendar. Now I hope that that doesn't strike fear into your hearts, because one of the big challenges here is to see that this kind of transition can be made smoothly, and every institution that has made this change has gone through it without disastrous results. But I think that we're faced with a tremendously interesting year to see now how we can involve everybody in making this change, getting the proper kind of student input, for example, as well as the faculty, of course, and then shaping this in terms of our urban thrust. This is our unique opportunity. Now, some people may say, well, look, you're kind of coming along here as a Johnny-come-lately in this calendar change to the 414. Well, remember the words of Alexander Pope. He said, "Be not the first by whom the new is tried, nor yet the last by whom the old is laid aside." So I guess there are still a lot of people who haven't caught up with it, some people who are ahead of us. But the challenge that we've got is to take this and use it uniquely for the opportunities that this college has. And those, of course, are oftentimes described in terms of the urban opportunities. Here, too, we've had a lot of rhetoric. But there has been a strong conversion, I think, of the college over the years to this fact that, as Plutarch said, the city is teacher of the man. And we have been engaged in many interesting experiments, like the crisis colony, for example, and new alignments, so that it was out of this institution that an urban consortium was born among 11 or 12 colleges. And now we face the exciting possibilities of the interdisciplinary approach, so that somehow or another every academic program at this institution is infused or transfused with an understanding and an appreciation for and an involvement in the life and culture of the city. And I am happy to say that I am confident that funding will come to the institution to turn us around from the inside out and not simply hang something on the edge of things. This is going to be a great experiment. We have wanted to see new methods, new methodologies in the ways in which we carry on our teaching enterprise. And there have been all kinds of co-learner models that have been set up. The enthusiasm with which many of the teachers have adopted the learning through discussion approach, the honors colloquium, the independent study programs, the possible internships that can be developed here in the city. the utilization of all the educational resources that we have about us. All of this is a challenge in terms of getting from rhetoric to reality in this revolution. We have had high hopes for cooperation with other institutions, and this has happened. Largely through the leadership of Dr. Oslins, who was formerly our librarian here, this consortium of libraries of the private colleges in the Twin City areas was created. Augsburg College enjoys the only shared professorship that resulted from a program that sought to connect private colleges with the University of Minnesota in the shared professorship of Dr. Kenneth Erickson in the Department of Physics. We have now entered into the St. Paul Consortium so that students can take courses at Hamlin and McAllister and St. Thomas and St. Catherine's without an exchange of tuition. Just see to it that your schedule and your transportation is such that you can make it, and they can come here. The calendar change will make it possible for us to be much closer in our cooperation as we articulate programs with the St. Paul colleges and with St. Olaf. Remember that the cooperative was fundamental to saving the family farm, so the cooperative can help the small private college. We wanted to achieve some visibility, for Augsburg too long was buried here in this south side area of Minneapolis. One of the leading businessmen said to me the first year that I was here, "Augsburg College, I've lived here all my life, I know nothing about it." I said, "That's probably not your fault." But now I think we have achieved some visibility, and our profile is much clearer. We are seen, heard, and recognized. Community development has been one of those noble aspirations. We have been concerned about our neighbors. We've been concerned about the renewal of the area. And no institution in this country that I know of enjoys the privilege of, first of all, being next door to a model city. The only funding that was given to the library program by the federal government this year was for colleges that were close to a model city, and we got one of the grants. We're next to a model city, and we are in a new town, the only new town in the whole United States, Cedar Riverside area. The possibilities of this we really don't quite yet understand. But this is the kind of thing that's emerging. The quality of our faculty has certainly been one of our primary aims, and by whatever standards, we have a stronger and ever-improving teaching force. We have believed in the principle of shared responsibility. And today, students are on all kinds of committees and even voting members of departments. And students and faculty can send representatives to the Board of Regents. There is a greater autonomy among these groups, but a greater interdependence. We have sought to see some change in the complexion, if you please, of the college, a greater heterogeneity, and we have seen a shift in this complexion in terms of race, in terms of religion, in terms of region. The aspirations have been here. Attempts have been made. Achievements, however, are still too minimal. We've got a long ways to go. We've got a long ways to go to make the private college cluster in this area work. We've got a long ways to go to become a dynamic model for liberal arts colleges in an urban setting. We've got a long ways to go to make the city a laboratory and a classroom. We've got a long ways to go to meet the new educational needs of society. My parenthesis here is, see what's happening in the area of teacher education and the supply of teachers exceeding the demand. We've got a long ways to go to make intellectual and artistic pursuits on this campus an exciting and attractive adventure. We've got to get confrontation, a greater confrontation with the Christian gospel and its essential values on this campus. I say we've got a long ways to go. It's still uncertain whether we can change our aspirations into reality. But Crislock suggests that to become a creative center, we will have to withstand the backlash, which he suggested would develop, and how prophetic he was. He has the prophetic insight of a historian. Like the physicist, he knows that every Every action has a reaction. We have gone through an era of turbulence, followed now by a more pacific age. The signs are everywhere that we may be entering into a new kind of conservatism. Dr. Davis tells me that he thinks we're on the edge of a new Victorian age. You read in the papers that you can now rent tuxedos that are Edwardian in character. Some evenness and tranquility are welcome, but it must not produce the law and order of the cemetery. For we face a double danger. The danger of squelching inquiry and the danger of suppressing the expression of our freedom. And listening to Dr. Skibby at the faculty workshop underlined the fact that the unique characteristic of this institution is that of freedom. Reminded me again that we have something to say in our motto, from or through truth to freedom. Freedom to inquire, freedom to shape our lives, freedom to venture, freedom to express. These are bound up with the heritage of this institution. But backlashes do develop. They often develop in proportion to the abuse of freedom. Or to put it in another way, law and order is the offspring of the abdication of responsibility. Freedom is genuine when it is concerned about the worth and the dignity and the rights of others. The Augustinian sentence is correct: love and do as you please. We must be more keenly aware than ever before how carefully and consistently and persistently we need to spell out this responsibility in freedom as the basis for all our conduct. It's fundamental in our acceptance of human rights for all individuals. We need to confront the rights of groups like faculty and students and administration and see that they each have their place and that we cannot become engaged in conflict for conflict's sake. The rights of segments differentiated by sex and race and creed or political persuasion must be respected. The rights of society to provide structure for all of us must also be accepted. Backlash is the dark euphemism for polarization. Grim-faced law and order fixes and freezes and thus denies liberty. But I have the confidence that there is enough maturity on this campus to resist polarization in any form. Furthermore, we could not stand it because our existence is too tenuous. Our life is too fragile. For Chryslock was never more right. The crisis is a fiscal one. We share it with all private colleges. For many of these colleges, this business of facing the financial problems is a trauma. For us, it's been a way of life. Read Chryslock's book. Read about the disaster 75, 80 years ago when the grasshoppers went through this whole rural area and it looked like the farmers weren't going to be able to give anything to keep Augsburg alive. Go back to my own day here at Augsburg College when offerings were taken in chapel to pay the coal bill. But candor is essential. To capitalize on the opportunities which we have had over these past years to improve all aspects of this institution, an operating deficit has been created of over $500,000. True, our net worth increases, but our liquidity is endangered. And when our credit no longer reaches, then we are stuck. We're stuck like the Missouri farmer who went to town one day with a load of apples. And the road became muddier and muddier. The horses in the wagon went deeper and deeper. He didn't know it, but a board in the wagon box came loose. And the apples, as he was struggling with his team and his wagon, began one by one to roll out of the wagon box. Finally, the horses and the wagon were mired down, couldn't get any further, and he turned to see what he could do about the load, and he discovered it was all gone, and he said, "Stuck by cracky and nothing to unload." Now, that's the kind of situation we could get into. Be stuck and have nothing to unload. But to prevent that, the board has said to this institution, look, in 1971-72, the budget has got to be balanced. You cannot budget a deficit. And that's the kind of gun that the president is under. We must balance the budget. But 72-73 can even be more difficult. And that's why there has been created under the aegis of the Board of Regents a Council for Strategic Planning. We call it STRAP. And this represents regents and faculty and administration and students and alumni, and its purpose is to so shape the enterprise that we can afford to keep going in 72-73 and hopefully turn a fiscal corner. The big question, you see, is how to overcome the deficit of both scholars and dollars. This is what we have to face. I said that we've had a little bit lower enrollment. That's dangerous. The fact that we got a deficit, that's dangerous. And in all of this, we need understanding and cooperation and patience, and we need your suggestions. If you don't think that we're doing it right, tell us. But remember that always we've got to keep an eye on the bottom line. It must balance. But having said this, may I make one thing clear? May I make one thing clear? Creativity is not dependent upon financial prosperity. Revolutionary advances have been made under adverse and often poverty-stricken conditions. Affluence is no guarantor of creativity. There is some gruesome history which shows that huge grants and gifts have given birth to stillborn educational banalities or produced only academic monstrosities. Creativity does require time. And that's why we do have to have some dollars to free up some time. But the chief requisites are courage, imagination, and hard work. And those who give to this institution will give not because we've got a deficit or we need help, but because we are about what is new and exciting and worthwhile, right in the middle of the second revolution. And it's in this connection, of course, that Chris Locke makes reference to donors. He questions whether donors today will be satisfied with what they see on college campuses. There's a great deal of truth to his description of donors as being essentially conservative. People don't like to take chances with their money, whether they be taxpayers, churchgoers, or businessmen. They probably do tend to support continuity. But I would like to insert the thought that increasingly taxpayers, churchmen, and businessmen support institutions which supply both continuity and change. I think there is evidence of this in the government programs which are emerging. I think it is true in the American Lutheran Church. We get an annual subsidy from the church. We've gotten a huge gift from the church in terms of the Life program, and all kinds of experimental things have been supported by the church. The town hall, for example, or the experiment in urban programs, or the Triple T, or the recreation program that we had on campus this summer. I think there's evidence that your church is willing to support change. And businessmen? Oh, some of them say, the colleges are going to the dogs, and it's because of the professors and because of the students. But the people who are really in the know are willing to support. And I find evidence of this all over, and we find evidence of it right now in the kind of leadership which we're getting in the Augsburg Annual Fund from men in the community, men and women who are involved in business. But I suppose I have to lay to rest again the rumor that's been around as long as I've been here, that Augsburg College turned down a great big gift from Dayton Company to build a building. I have to lay this to rest every year. I talked to some students last year, and they said, we heard that Augsburg turned down a gift from Dayton. Well, it so happens that the largest gift to our recent Centennial Building Fund came from the Dayton Corporation. But some of these rumors get abroad and they need to be laid to rest. Now, I mentioned the annual fund. This is going to involve faculty and students as well as business and alumni and church and so on. And we're going to be asked to make a commitment. And I don't think we can expect anything from anyone else unless we ourselves, as students and faculty, are willing to be involved in some way, in spite of freezes, in spite of low salaries, in spite of the fact that we think we don't have anything. Because our commitment will speak the loudest to the world about us. And that brings me to the final point in Chrislock's paragraph, the whole process of communicating and interpreting Augsburg College. This is a big and challenging point. How can we tell people that significant things are happening, that great people are working together on this campus, that strides are being made, that we're not sleeping through a revolution? How to get the story out? Oh, it just isn't a matter of the PE department and how many lines they can get into the Minneapolis Star or the Minneapolis Tribune. It's not how much the faculty goes out and speaks or the president stands up like a windmill here and there and everywhere making speeches. That isn't going to do it, although there are tremendous gaps that need to be crossed between our constituency and the college. I wonder if the greatest potential for getting the story of Augsburg College out to the surrounding community and to the world is not the greatest possibility is with the students. If we can harness the students of this institution to be a part of this communications effort, we'll make it. Chrislock assumes a good product, and so do I. The question is how to sell it. 25 more freshmen and 10 more transfers this fall would have released us for all kinds of effectiveness that may otherwise be strictured. How to get the story out about this liberal arts college, about our academic excellence, about our Christian commitment, and about our urban possibilities. Dr. Gilstead said to me, I can't believe that there are not 25 more freshmen who would want to be a part of this creative community. Just that much would make all the difference in the world during this coming year. But all of this is going to take a tremendous amount of combined effort. No presidential prodding or development staff or church body or business community or angel or government program is going to assure our success in and of itself. The survival of this or any other college is going to depend upon the ability that we can muster to cultivate all of these areas, every fertile plot we can find, whether it's in government or church or business or alumni or friends or students or faculty. If we can do this, we will stay alive for our mission. And maybe that's where we ought to come down the hardest, on our mission. Our business is to fulfill our mission as a college of the church in the arena of higher education. Our business is not merely to prolong our life as an institution. And here I would plead guilty and make my confession, because I am afraid that I have been too willing to talk about survival and not enough about mission. Whatever time is ours, whatever resources we have, let them be put in the name of our Lord to becoming a creative center in the second academic revolution. Let's take up our mission, one that presses for the quality of life as well as the quality of education. In this mission, we are not asked merely to survive or to be successful, but simply to be faithful. And I hope that your presence here today will be an indication of your fidelity. Thank you very much.